I only feared him. That is what Randy Orton supposedly said about 10 different wrestlers during his career. The Viper, the Legend Killer, the man who made grown competitors tremble just by hearing his entrance music. But here is the problem. Nobody can find that list. No interview, no podcast, no conference call, nothing. If Randy Orton really named 10 wrestlers he feared, where is the proof? And if he never actually said it, what does that tell us about the man behind the myth? Today we are diving deep into the biggest lie in wrestling media, and what we find might be even more interesting than the list itself. There is zero evidence that Randy Orton ever created a list of 10 wrestlers he feared. None. This claim has bounced around YouTube and wrestling websites for years. Clickbait articles promise the shocking names. Thumbnails show Orton looking scared, but when you search for the original source, it does not exist. The list is fake. It was never real. So why did so many people believe it? Because Randy Orton spent 20 years building a persona that said he feared nothing. And people love watching perfect images crack. The truth is more complicated than a simple list. Orton may never have said he feared 10 wrestlers, but the research shows he feared plenty of other things. Career decline, physical damage, younger talent taking his spot, and maybe most of all, losing control of his carefully built reputation. The media conflated different stories to create this viral myth. They took Orton's documented fear of spiders and twisted it. They grabbed his criticisms of reckless young wrestlers and misread them. They borrowed storylines from Brock Lesnar's real backstage controversies and pasted Orton's name on top. The result was a fictional list that felt true because it played into what fans wanted to believe. That even the most intimidating wrestler had moments of doubt. That even Randy Orton looked across the ring sometimes and felt nervous. But Orton built his entire identity on being the opposite of that. His character was calculated aggression. He was the source of fear, not the victim of it. Admitting he feared competitors would destroy 2 decades of careful character work. Let's talk about what people actually confuse for fear. Randy Orton has arachnophobia. He is terrified of spiders. This is documented. It is real. And it is kind of funny. The man nicknamed after a deadly snake runs away from tiny bugs. Media outlets love this irony. They wrote headlines about it constantly. And here is where the confusion started. Because Orton genuinely has a fear, content creators could technically say Randy Orton fears something. Then they stretched that truth. They implied his fearfulness extended to his professional life. They never said it directly, but they let readers make the connection. A spider fear became a wrestler fear in the minds of casual fans clicking through their feeds. Then there were his comments about young talent. So in 2020, Orton gave a conference call interview. He talked about NXT wrestlers. He expressed worry about their approach to the business. He specifically mentioned performers like Tommaso Ciampa. But what Orton actually said was not about competitive fear. He said if you do a lot of careless and reckless moves, you will destroy your body and make no money doing it, and then you end up working at McDonald's because you never went to college and you destroyed your neck in the ring. That is not fear of being beaten. That is a veteran warning younger performers about terrible business decisions. Orton spent 20 years perfecting a safe, athletic style. He protected his body, he maximized his earning potential, and he watched younger wrestlers throw themselves off ladders for short-term pops that would cost them long-term health. But wrestling media does not get clicks from reasonable career advice, so they reframed his comments. Suddenly, Randy Orton was scared of the new generation. He was threatened by their intensity. He feared being surpassed. None of that was what he said, but it made better headlines, and it fed into the myth that Orton had a list of people who intimidated him. The third source of confusion came from Brock Lesnar. There are real documented lists of wrestlers Brock Lesnar hated working with. Videos and articles detail 8 to 10 names of people Lesnar refused to face or complained about. Those lists are based on actual backstage stories, actual heat, actual refusals. They are real. Orton and Lesnar have similar roles in WWE. Both are dominant, both are intimidating, both play volatile main event heels. So lazy digital journalists recycled the Lesnar template. They took the proven narrative structure and applied it to Orton. Why create new research when you can just swap the names? The problem is Orton never had those controversies. He never refused to work with people based on fear. In fact, Orton publicly stated he has a lot of respect for Brock. That is not the language of fear. That is the language of two elite performers acknowledging each other professionally. But facts did not matter. The sensational narrative was already out there. And once it spread, it became wrestling internet truth. So we have established the list does not exist. But that leaves us with an interesting question. Who should have been on it? If Randy Orton were honest about the wrestlers who truly challenged him, who would make that list? Not in terms of literally scaring him, but in terms of pushing him to his absolute limits, physically, psychologically, professionally. The research identifies 10 names that fit. These are the wrestlers who forced Orton to be better than he wanted to be, who exposed his weaknesses, who made him prove himself over and over. Let's count them down. Number 10, Chris Benoit. Early in Orton's career, Benoit set the technical standard. Their match at SummerSlam 2004 was Orton's first World Championship win. It was also one of his first truly great singles matches. Before that night, critics questioned whether Orton deserved his push. They said he only got opportunities because of his family name. His father and grandfather were both wrestlers. Evolution protected him from having to prove himself against top-level competition alone, but Benoit forced him to deliver. Benoit's technical skill was unmatched. If Orton could not keep up, the whole world would see it on pay-per-view. That match proved Orton belonged, but it also proved he needed elite opponents to reach elite performance levels. Without Benoit pushing him, Orton might never have developed the precision he became known for. The pressure of facing someone with such a strong technical foundation created anxiety Orton had to overcome. He could not rely on his natural athleticism alone. He had to study, he had to prepare, he had to execute with perfection. Benoit represented the fear of being exposed as technically inadequate, the fear that without proper training and focus, Orton would be revealed as just another second-generation wrestler riding family connections. That match at SummerSlam was Orton's statement to the world, but it was also his private battle with self-doubt. Number 9, Jake the Snake Roberts. This one might surprise people. Orton and Roberts never had a major feud. They are from different generations. But Orton has repeatedly expressed deep respect for Roberts. He said Roberts knows the business like no other. He valued being able to talk to Roberts and learn from him. What did Orton fear about Jake Roberts? Being outsmarted. Roberts represents the highest level of psychological wrestling. He did not need to be the strongest or the fastest. He understood how to manipulate crowds, how to build tension, how to make people care. That intelligence is what Orton respected. And respecting something means recognizing it as a threat. If Roberts was in his prime during Orton's era, Orton would have had to match that mental game. And that would have been a challenge Orton was not sure he could win. Roberts proved that wrestling is not just about athletic ability. It is about understanding human psychology. It is about knowing when to strike and when to wait. Orton learned from Roberts that the mind is more dangerous than the body, but that lesson also created anxiety. Because mental mastery takes years to develop, and there is always someone smarter waiting to outwit you. Roberts embodied the fear of intellectual inferiority in a business that rewards cunning as much as strength. Number 8, Edge. Their rivalry produced what WWE marketed as the greatest wrestling match ever at Backlash 2020. That is a bold claim. Whether it lived up to the hype is debatable. But what is not debatable is that Edge forced Orton to operate at maximum technical ability. Edge was one of the most gifted storytellers in WWE history. He could make any match feel important, any moment feel dramatic. Working with Edge meant Orton could not coast. He could not rely on his natural charisma and hope the crowd stayed interested. He had to plan every sequence, execute every move perfectly, match Edge's intensity beat for beat. Their cinematic match during the pandemic era was a different kind of challenge. No crowd, no live energy, just two performers and a camera. That kind of wrestling requires complete trust and total precision. Edge represented the fear of technical inadequacy, the fear that Orton's smooth style would be exposed as lazy if he faced someone who demanded more. Edge pushed Orton to work harder on storytelling, to think about camera angles, to consider how every facial expression would read on screen. This was not the kind of wrestling Orton grew up with. It required adaptation. And adaptation means admitting your current approach might not be good enough. Their matches together showed Orton at his best, but they also revealed how much he relied on Edge to elevate him. That dependency created a quiet fear. What happens when the opponents who make you look great are no longer around? Number 7, The Undertaker. This is the mythical challenge, the existential one. The Undertaker was not just a wrestler, he was WWE's most enduring supernatural character. Facing him meant facing the idea that some competitors are simply larger than life. Orton's 2005 feud with Undertaker was built around the legend killer trying to end the WrestleMania streak. That streak was sacred. It represented Undertaker's immortality. If Orton succeeded, he would cement himself as the ultimate giant killer. If he failed, he would just be another name on the list of people who could not beat the dead man. The psychological weight of that challenge is immense. Undertaker decides legacies. He makes or breaks careers with a single match. Orton had to elevate his character work to a legendary level just to be believable opposite him. Later in his career, Orton echoed these psychological tactics. During his feud with Bray Wyatt, he burned Sister Abigail's resting place. That supernatural psychological warfare came directly from what he learned facing Undertaker. The fear here was not physical. It was the fear of fighting someone the audience believes cannot be beaten and having to convince them otherwise. Undertaker's presence in WWE was a constant reminder that some legacies are untouchable. Some performers operate on a different level. Orton could be smooth, he could be athletic, he could be calculated, but could he be mythical? That question haunted his early career. Working with Undertaker meant confronting the limits of his own character. The Viper is dangerous, but is he supernatural? Is he legendary? Or is he just very good at his job? Those doubts lingered long after their feud ended. Number 6, Brock Lesnar. Orton publicly says he respects Brock, but respect in this context is code. It means I recognize your power and adjust my strategy accordingly. Lesnar is the most physically dominant performer in modern WWE history. He is a legitimate combat athlete, former UFC heavyweight champion, amateur wrestling standout. When Lesnar hits you, it is real. When he suplexes you, you feel it for days. Orton's entire style is built on being smooth and calculated. He does not rely on brute force. He relies on timing and precision. Against Lesnar, that is not enough. Lesnar can overpower technique. He can shrug off strategy. Facing him means Orton has to work harder and smarter than in any other match just to survive. The fear here is acknowledging physical inferiority. Orton knows he cannot beat Lesnar in a real fight, so every match requires perfect planning. Any mistake could result in real injury. That is not competitive fear, but it is professional caution bordering on anxiety. Their match at SummerSlam 2016 ended with Lesnar busting Orton open the hard way. Real blood from real punches? That is the kind of physical risk Orton spent his career trying to avoid. Lesnar represents everything Orton is not: raw power, unpredictable intensity, a willingness to blur the line between performance and real violence. Working with Lesnar meant accepting that control could slip away at any moment. And for someone like Orton, who built his career on precise control, that loss of certainty was deeply unsettling. Number 5, Triple H. The mentor turned nightmare. Triple H brought Orton into Evolution. He protected him, taught him, made him a star, but then their relationship soured, and Orton had to feud with the man who built him. That creates a unique psychological challenge. Triple H knew Orton's weaknesses. He knew how Orton thought. He knew what scared him. Their feud escalated into some of the most personal, vicious storytelling in WWE history. Orton attacked the McMahon family. He punted Vince McMahon in the head. He kissed an unconscious Stephanie McMahon in front of her husband. These were not normal wrestling angles. These were acts of chaos designed to prove Orton had no limits. But underneath that aggression was fear. Fear that Triple H represented institutional power. Fear that if he did not go further than anyone expected, he would be crushed. Their 3 stages of Hell match was brutal. It required Orton to show endurance and ruthlessness simultaneously. Triple H was not just an opponent. He was a test of whether Orton could become the apex predator or remain the student forever. The psychological complexity of fighting your mentor cannot be overstated. Everything Orton knew about wrestling, he learned from Triple H. Every trick, every shortcut, every way to manipulate a crowd. Now he had to use those lessons against the teacher, and the teacher knew they were coming. That creates a unique form of anxiety. Can the student ever truly surpass the master, or will the master always have one more trick in reserve? Orton's entire 2009 run as a psychotic villain was an attempt to answer that question. He became more vicious than Triple H ever was, more unpredictable, more willing to cross lines. But that desperation revealed the fear underneath. The fear that without escalation, he would always be seen as Triple H's creation rather than his own man. Number 4, John Cena. The definitive rivalry. Orton and Cena are inseparable in WWE history. They came up together through Ohio Valley Wrestling. They ascended to the main event at the same time. They held the top championships for over a decade. They faced each other at 5 consecutive pay-per-views in 2009. Critics said their matches were repetitive, overrated, too formulaic, but that misses the point. Cena was not a physical threat to Orton. He was a professional one. Cena represented unwavering consistency. He was the face of the company, the top merchandise seller, the guy guy WWE built around. For Orton to stay relevant, he had to remain on Cena's level. That meant performing at maximum intensity for years. No breaks, no coast. Every match mattered because Cena made every match matter. The fear here was irrelevance. If Orton slipped even slightly, Cena would leave him behind. If his matches were not as good, fans would forget him. If his character work was not as sharp, WWE would deprioritize him. Cena forced Orton to be great by never allowing him to be anything less. That kind of sustained pressure over a decade is exhausting, and it requires constant fear of failure. Their careers are mirror images. Both debuted around the same time. Both won their first world championships young. Both became the faces of their respective brands. But Cena always seemed to be one step ahead in terms of mainstream recognition. He got the movie roles, the talk show appearances, the crossover appeal. Orton remained the wrestler's wrestler, respected by peers but never quite breaking into Cena's level of celebrity. That gap created professional anxiety. No matter how good Orton became, Cena set the standard. And standards are exhausting to chase when they keep moving higher. Number 3, Mick Foley. Specifically, Cactus Jack. Their Backlash 2004 hardcore match is what Orton calls the most important of his career, and the research backs that up. Before that match, Orton was a protected prospect. He looked good, he talked well, but fans questioned his toughness. Was he a real main eventer, or just a pretty face with a famous last name? Foley provided the test. A hardcore match with thumbtacks and barbed wire. Real pain, real blood, real risk. If Orton could not hang with a hardcore legend, his legend killer gimmick would die on the spot. The match was brutal. Orton took bumps he had never taken before. He bled, he screamed, he suffered, but he survived. And more importantly, he earned respect. Foley said afterward that fans looked at Orton like a completely different guy. That match validated everything WWE had invested in him, but the fear was massive. Fear of physical pain, fear of looking weak, fear that he could not live up to the standard. Foley did not just challenge Orton physically, he challenged his identity as a wrestler, and Orton had to prove himself through suffering. The weeks leading up to that match must have been terrifying. Orton knew what was coming, he knew Foley's reputation, he knew the match would hurt, but he also knew refusing would end his career before it truly began. So he walked into that match carrying the weight of his entire future. Every thumbtack, every barbed wire shot, every drop of blood was a test, and the fear of failing that test was overwhelming. But Orton passed, and in passing, he transformed from prospect to legitimate main event player. Foley gave him that transformation, but he also gave him nightmares, the kind that come from knowing you can be hurt, really hurt, and still having to get up and perform. Number 2, the young generation. This is not one wrestler, it is a category. Orton has spent years publicly worrying about younger talent. He criticizes their approach. He questions their priorities. He warns them about destroying their bodies. On the surface, this looks like veteran wisdom, and it is, but it is also fear. Fear that these younger wrestlers will make him look slow. Fear that their high spot style will make his calculated approach seem boring. Fear that WWE will prioritize their excitement over his consistency. When Orton talks about reckless moves leading to financial ruin, he is really talking about his own anxiety. He built a career on longevity, on being smart, on protecting his body so he could work for 20 years. But what if that does not matter anymore? What if fans prefer the guy who destroys himself for a 5-star match? What if WWE pushes someone who takes crazy risks because that is what gets social media attention? That fear of obsolescence drives Orton's criticism. He is not afraid of any individual young wrestler. He is afraid of what they represent, the evolution of the business beyond his style. Every generation fears being replaced, but for performers, that fear is sharper because your value is constantly measured. Every show, every match, every reaction, and when you see younger talent doing things you never did, taking risks you never took, getting reactions you had to work years to earn, it creates anxiety. Orton built his career on a specific philosophy. Work smart, protect yourself, maximize longevity. But the new generation does not care about longevity. They care about the moment. They care about going viral. They care about being the most talked about performer right now. That fundamental difference in philosophy represents an existential threat to everything Orton believes about wrestling. If they are right and he is wrong, then his entire career was built on a flawed foundation. That possibility is terrifying. Number 1, himself. The biggest name on the list is Randy Orton. His greatest fear has always been his own potential for self-destruction. Orton has made mistakes. He has been suspended. He has had backstage conflicts. He has dealt with injuries. His worst enemy has never been an opponent. It has been his own inability to stay consistent. His character is called the Viper because he strikes without warning. But that unpredictability is also his weakness. When Orton is focused, he is one of the best ever. When he is not, he is just another guy going through the motions. The fear of losing focus has haunted his entire career. The fear of one bad decision ending everything he built. The fear of his body breaking down before he is ready to retire. The fear of being remembered as the guy who could have been better. Every criticism he levels at younger talent is really directed at himself. Do not be reckless. Do not destroy your body. Do not make decisions that cost you money. Those are the lessons he learned the hard way. And his biggest fear is that he did not learn them well enough. Orton's career has been defined by peaks and valleys, moments of brilliance followed by periods of coasting, suspensions followed by comebacks, injuries followed by returns. That inconsistency is not external, it is internal. It comes from battling his own demons, his own doubts, his own tendency to sabotage success. The research shows a man constantly at war with himself, trying to maintain control, trying to stay disciplined, trying to avoid the mistakes that could end everything. But that control requires constant vigilance. And vigilance is exhausting. The fear is not that someone will beat him. The fear is that he will beat himself. So there you have it. The 10 wrestlers Randy Orton should have feared. Not because they scared him in the traditional sense, but because they forced him to confront his limitations. They made him better by making him uncomfortable. They challenged aspects of his career he wanted to ignore. The myth of the list was always fake, but the fears behind it were real. Orton spent 20 years building an image of invincibility. He wanted everyone to believe he feared nothing and no one. But the research shows something different. It shows a man constantly worried about his career, about his body, about his legacy, about being surpassed. The irony is that fear made him great. If Orton truly feared nothing, he might have been reckless. He might have taken unnecessary risks. He might have burned out years ago. But his anxiety kept him sharp. It made him strategic. It forced him to evolve. The greatest performers are not fearless. They are the ones who feel fear and use it as fuel. Randy Orton never needed to name 10 wrestlers he feared. His career speaks for itself. He faced the biggest names in wrestling history. He won every major championship. He set records for longevity. He earned respect from legends like Diamond Dallas Page, who said Orton belongs on the Mount Rushmore of WWE legends. But underneath that success was constant pressure, constant doubt, constant fear that one mistake would ruin everything. The list does not exist. It never did. But that does not mean Orton had nothing to fear. It just means he was smart enough never to admit it publicly, because admitting fear would contradict the persona that made him a star. The Viper does not fear. He strikes, he dominates, he wins. That is the character. But the man behind the character, he felt every challenge. He worried about every threat. He understood that his position at the top was never guaranteed. The wrestling business is built on perception, and Orton understood that better than most. If he admitted weakness, opponents would exploit it. If he showed doubt, fans would lose faith. If he revealed anxiety, his character would crumble. So he kept everything locked inside. He projected confidence even when feeling uncertain. He acted invincible even when feeling vulnerable. That is the burden of being a top performer. You cannot show cracks. You cannot reveal fears. You have to maintain the illusion even when the illusion is killing you. And maybe that is the real tragedy of the fake list. People wanted Randy Orton to admit fear because it would make him human. It would make him relatable. It would prove that even the most dominant wrestlers have doubts. But Orton could never give them that, because giving them that would mean giving up everything he worked for. The character, the mystique, the aura. All of it depends on never showing weakness. So the list remained a myth, a story people wanted to believe but could never confirm. And Orton remained the Viper, cold, calculated, untouchable. But now you know the truth. The list was never about 10 specific wrestlers. It was about 10 different fears. Fear of physical pain, fear of intellectual inferiority, fear of technical inadequacy, fear of mythical challenge, fear of physical dominance, fear of institutional power, fear of professional irrelevance, fear of proving toughness, fear of obsolescence, and fear of self-destruction. Those fears shaped Randy Orton's career more than any opponent ever could. They pushed him to improve. They forced him to adapt. They kept him hungry even after achieving everything. So what do you think? Which wrestler do you believe truly challenged Randy Orton the most? Was it Cena's consistency, Foley's brutality, Undertaker's myth, or was it his own self-doubt? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the truth behind the viral myth, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more wrestling content that goes beyond the clickbait. Because the real stories are always more interesting than the fake lists. Thanks for watching.